Cody, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Cannell. Here. Commissioner Hamilton.
Here.
Commissioner Herbert.
Here.
Commissioner Thompson.
Here.
Commissioner Williams.
Here.
Commissioner Robbins. Here. All present, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The minutes were emailed to us. Is there a motion regarding the minutes?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? First official action is Resolution 1301. Recognize.
Commissioners, I will keep my introduction brief because you all are so familiar with this subject. This is the culmination of many years of work on Century 2, but in particular this year to get ready for the next fiscal year and the next 5-year plan related to Century 2 funding for our wastewater and natural gas divisions. I'm going to recognize Mark Walker to summarize the events that have led up today and also the content of the resolution.
Commissioners, you will recall that last month we had a detailed presentation and discussion on funding plans for the wastewater and gas Century 2 infrastructure programs. And as promised, today we bring before you for your consideration a resolution that endorses those funding plans. My presentation today will be brief. I'm going to provide a quick update on the timeline for Century 2, how we got to today, and where we're going to go over the next several months, beginning in 2014. And then also review some of the key highlights of the funding programs for wastewater and gas, and then close with a quick summary of the resolution itself. So, back in the spring, during the 5-year plan presentation, the board expressed a sentiment, a desire to staff that it would like to adopt a resolution, a funding resolution for wastewater and gas, committing funding for their Century 2 programs, much like it did for electric and water back in 2011. So that process actually started in September when staff provided the board with an update on the condition of the wastewater system and a report on infrastructure needs for the next 10 fiscal years. That continued in October with the same presentation for the gas system. And then in November, last month, we came back and had a discussion of funding plans and looked at various funding plan scenarios for both wastewater and gas, and then actually reached consensus on a recommendation for funding plans, which are incorporated into Resolution 1301 for your consideration today. So that brings us up to the December meeting. Where we're going to go from here, beginning in February, we'll come back, and just like we did with wastewater and gas in the fall, we'll provide you an updated assessment on the water system, and that'll be followed in March with an update on the electric system. At the April meeting, we'll have our regular financial plan discussion. We'll look at the 10-year financial plans for all 4 systems. We'll talk about the proposed budget for FY15. But we'll also spend a good amount of time that day talking about the specific rate increase recommendations for all 4 systems, which will lead into the May meeting, which you can see the various items that the board will consider. But again, the big thing there will be the consideration of 3 years of rate increases for all 4 systems for electric, gas, water, and wastewater. And again, back in April, we'll spend a decent amount of time talking about how those rate increases are to be implemented, the impacts on various customer classes, etc. So that's where we plan to go in 2014. Real quickly review some of the highlights of the recommended funding plans, which are again incorporated into Resolution 1301, starting with the wastewater system. The funding plan anticipates a total capital program over 10 years of $516 million, which would average $52 million a year approximately. That level of capital investment will cover all the required projects remaining under the consent decree for both the collection system and treatment plants. And of course, the consent decree is due to expire in 2021, fully expire in 2021. The capital program will also support an ongoing infrastructure rehabilitation program for the wastewater system. That's the 25 miles of pipe replacement that we do annually. That's currently ongoing as a requirement of the consent decree. And then once the consent decree expires, we're going to continue at that pace of pipe replacement. In order to fully fund that capital program and also annual wastewater system operating cost, the plan calls for an annual increase of $3 on residential wastewater customer monthly bills. For our commercial and industrial customers, the annual rate adjustment would be an average 5% increase on their bill. And as you can see, debt, and we talked about, will continue to be a primary component of funding the wastewater capital plan as it has been over the past decade. The plan calls for an additional $340 million in bonds over the next 10 years. So that's a summary of the wastewater funding resolution. For gas, a 10-year capital plan of $216 million, average about $22 million per year. That capital plan will allow us to complete our cast iron and ductile iron main replacement program, and that'll be done by 2015. It also allows for us to complete the South Loop project, which you're very familiar with, and that is the new high-pressure gas main that will extend down Alcoa Highway to the new gate station at Topside Road. The primary benefit of that project, it will allow the University of Tennessee to convert its coal-fired steam plant to natural gas, which we're looking forward to for a number of reasons, but that should be completed by November of 2015. And then we're going to begin a new program, which Mike Boland and Gabe Bolas talked to you about back in October, and that's the implementation of a new steel main replacement program for low-pressure steel main. Start that around 2016 and should be completed by 2030. But fully funding the capital plan and the annual gas system operating costs, what will it take? The funding plan calls for a annual $1 increase on residential gas customer bills over the 10 years. And for commercial and industrial customers, the annual rate adjustment would amount to an average of 1.5% increase on their bill. Debt will also be a funding component, not as much as wastewater, but we anticipate the issuance of about $52 million in new gas system bonds over the next decade. And that's gas. To close, a summary of the resolution itself, and this is important, it does several things. One, the board expresses their endorsement or endorses the actual capital programs, the Century 2 programs for both systems. And then it endorses 10-year funding plans for those systems as well for those programs. And you can see from the resolution, they're attached to as exhibits for Exhibit A, Exhibit B for the resolution. And then very important, though the resolution does not adopt any actual rate increases today, as we talked, that will occur in the spring. But through this resolution, the board is expressing their intent to adopt budgets, rate increases, and periodic bond issues to ensure those programs are fully funded. And then also, it will direct the President and CEO to provide annual updates to the board on the status of those Century 2 programs and the funding of those programs. And that's all I had. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Is there a motion regarding resolution 1301?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Any discussion from the audience? Seeing none, I'd ask Mr. Coley to call the roll.
Commissioner Anderson.
Aye.
Commissioner Cannell. Aye. Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert.
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson. Aye. Commissioner Thompson.
Aye.
Commissioner Williams. Aye. Resolution 1301 has passed unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Now the President's report.
Commissioners, we have a little bit of an unusual President's report today. We have a series of presentations, and I want to introduce it to put it into context. You all know that we spend a lot of time and effort and money, frankly, training our employees, preparing our employees for the jobs of today as well as tomorrow. Our business has changed a lot in the last 15 years, and the lion's share of that training and preparation has really gone into technical skills. But as you know, we talked about it last year. Last Christmas, we started a renewed effort in leadership. We believe leadership is critical, as you know, starting with this board and with all of the members of our organization. And we initiated a program that really spans from executive and senior level all the way to emerging leaders in the organization. Throughout this year, you've seen some of the people who are involved in that program. Many of them are here with us again today. This program is really, really important to our future, and we are grateful for all of these folks investing their time in this preparation. In order to accomplish this, we have sought the services of a friend of KUB. Dr. Alex Miller joins us today. He's at the end of the aisle down here. He has been a friend of KUB for quite some time. Back in the 90s, he helped us with some strategy work and did a very effective job. Alex is the William B. Stokely Chair of Management at the University of Tennessee and the College of Business, and he has also served as the Associate Dean for Executive Education. He tells us that he's had bigger challenges than us, but sometimes we're not sure of that. Alex is uniquely qualified to assist us in this regard because he really has a kinship with us. Alex grew up with his father being an employee of the electric division, and while he was an employee, he worked his way through college and got his degree. So Alex understands the commitment of employees at KUB to our community, so he is very much in tune with what we want to do here at KUB. He is also very helpful in helping us see the forest and the trees, because sometimes we don't see both. And he helps us also identify ways to improve in that regard. So I'm going to introduce Alex, who is going to put these projects into context. But I want to tell you that we've asked each of the presenters today to limit their time to 15 minutes, because we want you to hear from all three projects. It'll be a very high-level presentation, only 15 minutes. We encourage you to ask questions, but keep in mind, with Alex's introduction and that's about a 50-minute presentation, and we don't want to cut off the last group who's presenting. So please ask questions. You have in your notebooks the names of the presenters today, and then I'll turn it over to Alex. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I make my comments, I want to say thanks to you folks. KUB is just an amazing resource for our community, and I appreciate so much the sacrifice and the leadership that you have provided to making that real. It is an honor and a privilege for me to get to work with this organization. As Mentha said, KUB was, maybe you don't pick up on this, but KUB changes lives and changes the lives of families, and I'm one of those. I am where I am today because of KUB and what it did for our family. So it's a company with a proud heritage, and thank you so much for continuing that heritage and your leadership. It is also an organization that, in my opinion, has unprecedented commitment to leadership development. I say that this year marks my 30th year in working with companies in development of leaders. I have yet to come across another organization that has made a more real commitment to leadership development than KUB. And I think you'll see that as we talk about what's been done here, and I'm just really pleased to get to be part of that. Let's talk about that effort. As I said, in my own experience, I find it to be unprecedented. Good leadership development always combines three pieces. First of all, you have to invest time in it, not just talk about it. I've never worked with an organization. I've probably worked with 200 organizations. I don't think I've ever found one that would deny that people are its most important asset. I've found very few that actually behave that way and commit the time to developing people. KUB is a rare exception in that regard. Simply finding the time to develop people and allow them to grow and invest in their growth is the first requirement. With the leadership of Mentha and Bill, their vision was to make a 5-year commitment to development of leaders in the organization, expanding the strengthening the bench. And that is, again, I just don't know of another organization that's thinking 5 years out about their leadership and what needs to be done there to develop leadership. It needs to be focused. Good leadership development is not something that is peanut butter spread across the organization. Instead, you do a careful assessment of where your opportunities lie, and you make strategic investments in developing those leaders. In this case, it was 9 VPs and 7 high potential managers. Again, many of the people that are seated over there and that you'll be hearing from. Those became the focus of the effort. And the last key ingredient is that the leadership development needs to be integrated. It needs to not just look at what the individual needs, but what does the organization need. And the development needs to take place at the junction of those two. And it needs to involve real assignments. And in KUB, in this effort, we've done each of those. So we started with a 360-degree personal assessment of each of the 17 people in the group. They heard from 5 or 6 of the direct reports, 5 or 6 of their peers, and then senior leaders around them as well. We put all that into a package. We assessed 12 different dimensions of leadership that were just seen as being critical to KUB, and we gave everybody back a thick stack of data on what we discovered. And out of that, they developed individualized personal development plans. And that became a commitment of what they were going to do over the next couple of years to address the strengths and the opportunities that they saw in their personal assessment. Along with that came executive coaching skills. I continue to meet with those individuals and follow through on, this is what you're working on next, how's this going, what can be done to strengthen your skills even further. Meanwhile, we also have ongoing organizational development skills. So this is not just developing the individuals, but the entire management team and strengthening the entire organization, not just individuals within the organization. And the final piece of this, and I think in many ways this is the most important piece, we have live fire assignments. And what I mean by live fire assignments is just like a military training. There's so much training you can get in the classroom, but there's a different kind of training that says, let's put you out on the field and have real bullets zipping over your head. That's live fire training. And the live fire training in this context is assignments that are real, that are important, and that are messy. And you'll see the ones that we've come up with. We evaluated about 10 different proposals and came up with 3 assignments that were critically important to KUB. And we structured these so that they would advance not only KUB as an organization, but the individuals that were participating in the assignment as part of their leadership development package. So that's what we mean by live fire. Out of the 10 that we looked at, we ended up with these 3, and these are the 3 that you'll be hearing from today. As I said, all of these meet the criteria of being real. That is, these are issues that Bill and Memphis said, these are issues that the organization genuinely needs to be wrestling with. They're important. Each one of them we're seen as being board worthy. That's why we're taking your time today and having you brief on them. And they're messy. All real world important problems are messy, and those certainly meet that requirement. And part of development is just learning how to deal with these messy problems. And the final thing that I want to say about these is that they were opportunities to not only advance KUB, but to develop the leaders that were participating in them. So as you listen to these presentations, I hope that you'll wear both of those hats. Listen for what's being done to advance KUB, but also listen for what's being done to advance the individuals that are involved in the work. And in your questions and input, I hope that you'll approach that from both of those perspectives. That's certainly the way the projects were designed and are being managed. Any questions for me? Let's put the star of the show. Yes.
Can the commissioners participate?
Absolutely not.
All right, great question. Okay, who's up? Are we going to start with water?
Water.
John, you're up.
Water.